Hello, and welcome to episode 0 of the Freediving Podcast, your source for information about training for freediving. I am your host, Renee Blunden. I'm a freediving instructor trainer and athlete teaching and training in Dahab, Egypt to discover and promote the healthiest and safest ways to train and prepare for freediving. In this podcast, I'll be offering information and tips about nutrition for freediving, fitness for freediving, mental training techniques, freediving and breath hold training concepts, breathing for freediving, and helpful advice to freedive in an enjoyable, safe, and healthy way. This podcast is the result of my passion for freediving while living a healthy and epic lifestyle. The information I present is based on my own research and personal experiences, and hopefully eventually the combined efforts of an open source information network, which I invite you to join on Facebook at the Freediving Podcast Community Group. All podcasts for this program will be hosted on my website at reneeblunden.com/podcast. And both informations and questions can be sent to me at info@reneeblunden.com. Thank you all for listening. So, having set this up, the purpose of this podcast is to provide helpful information about preparing and training for freediving in a nice way, in the healthiest way possible, and the safest way possible. Some of the problems that I've noticed in freediving is there's just a lack of information out there about training for freediving in a safe way where you're not blacking out all the time or LMCing all the time, where you don't end up with a lung injury or chest pressure or ear barotrauma, where you don't end up overtraining and burning out and getting sick or getting decompression sickness, among a lot of other problems that I've witnessed or experienced myself. And as many of you out there know, a lot of these things, they don't just take a few days to recover from. It can take weeks, sometimes months to recover from some of these issues. So why listen to me about these things? Like, who am I to advise you? I'm not Umberto Pellizzari, who's been freediving for like a million years. And I'm not Alexei Molchanov, who freedives to like 130 meters. I'm still figuring out my own training, and I feel like I'm still early on in my freediving journey. And when I was setting up this podcast, I was thinking, oh, is this going to be like the blind leading the blind here? But I do have some experience. I've been freediving for 6 years now, full time. So not just on the weekends or in the summertime, but year round. And I've been training and competing around the world, not in a million places, but in quite a few. And so I'm hoping that maybe some freedivers out there can learn some things from my mistakes, or learn to embrace the mistakes if you make them yourself. Also, as a freediving instructor and instructor trainer, I see a lot of mistakes that students make and a lot of misunderstanding of the information that's out there. I'll talk more about this later. And then I also bring freediving insights from Dahab, which really is a mecca for freediving. You have freedivers here from all over the world teaching and training freediving. And so not only do I see the same patterns over the years in my training, things that work well and things that don't work well, but I also get to see the patterns of the people around me who are training. And maybe you have one person making the same mistake over and over and over again, and maybe you have many people making the same mistakes over and over again. So like, for example, you have a freediver in Europe or America or somewhere, and maybe they're a 30-meter diver, and they get this idea in their mind that they want to break a national record. So they book a flight to Dahab and take 2 months holiday from their job and book a coach, and then they come here and they have all this pressure on themselves and all this stress to do this national record and in only 2 months time. And then literally I can kind of see it before it's coming. It's usually around week 6 or 7 that it just turns into total disaster. Either they get a squeeze, or they black out and then need time to recover from that, and maybe they just get so overtrained and then they get sick and then they can't like dive at all. And I see this happening all the time, like over and over again. And sometimes it's successful. People have come here with this goal, and it has worked. It really just depends on the person, on the amount of training and preparation that they did before they came here. But if they didn't do that much before they came here, and they just try and go deep without taking the time to adapt, it ends up turning into a total disaster, usually around somewhere between week 5 and 9, I would say. And as much as I hate to admit it, I was actually like one of these types of freedivers. When I came to Dahab, my goal was to break a US national record. And so I can really relate to those people who come here with similar goals, because I was in the same shoes. And thankfully I made it past week 6 and 9, because I wasn't just here on like a 2 or 3 month stint. I was here longer term. I made it to October, November. I made it to about 3 months before something happened. And basically I had a little bit of an accident. It wasn't like a crazy big deal thing, but it was enough to definitely affect my training going forward. What happened is I was training in the Blue Hole with Alenka Artnik. She was training monofin. I was training free immersion. We had the line set down to 70 meters, and she had just done her dive to 70 meters, and it was like perfect. And then I was up next, so I had nothing to even worry about because she had just gone down there. So I was heading down on my dive, and everything was perfect. It was just absolutely amazing. I was going down, pulling, I did my mouth fill, I was free falling, I built up some really good speed. I mean, I felt like I was like totally flying. I was in heaven. And then all of a sudden I felt something on my leg, and so I opened my eyes and I realized that I was actually I had free falled into the corals. The Blue Hole is actually quite narrow, and so in certain spots you can you've got the coral wall that comes kind of in, and so somehow the line ended up like putting us into the corals. And because I really wasn't all there down at, this was right like 68 meters, I was still trying to finagle to get to the ball. I don't know what I was thinking. And so I spent, I would say, around 10 seconds down there trying to get to the ball. And once I realized that I couldn't get to the ball because there was like a bunch of coral like blocking the way, I couldn't get past it. The ball was on the other side. So I turned to go up, but I couldn't have my legs straight because the corals were there. So I had to bend my legs. And when I did that, the lanyard got snagged on one of my weights on my weight belt. So as I'm pulling to come up, I couldn't make my leg, one of my legs go straight because the lanyard was stuck on the belt. And I couldn't understand like what was going on, like why won't my leg go straight? So for like the first like 5-10 meters of the dive on the ascent, I was coming up with my leg like bent, and I'm just like, what is going on? Like, why can't I straighten my leg? And so obviously I'm not hydrodynamic at all, and I'm stressing out because I don't know what is happening here. And then finally I realized, oh, it's just the lanyard stuck on the weight. And then, so I took it off the weight, and then my leg went straight. But then after that, I was like kind of in like panic mode. I was like, oh my gosh, I was just down there for like super long time, and I just like lost so much effort and energy. Like, I'm going to black out. And so I went into total like panic and was rushing up and was thinking, oh, I'm going to black out any second. And and then I'm like, okay, I just need to make it to my safety diver. I just need to make it to Alenka. Just need to make it to Alenka. So I'm coming up. I'm like, just need to make it to Alenka. Like, that was like the only thing I was thinking. And then when I got to, sorry, my cat. Then when I got to about 20 meters, 25 meters where Alenka was, I give her the sign, like problem, you know, with the hand, like the scuba divers do. It was like problem, thinking, oh, okay, now she's going to rescue me. But she didn't rescue me. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, what the heck? She's going to freaking wait till I'm like totally effing blacked out before she rescues me. And so I like keep going, for lack of a better option there. So I keep pulling to the surface, make it to the surface, and I LMC, very strong LMC, and I didn't black out, very close, but I didn't black out. And Alenka was right there, did everything she was supposed to do, really supported me and everything, and was fine, totally fine, no squeeze or anything like that, thankfully, but in the end, I was actually glad that Alenka didn't rescue me, because what it made me realize is how much extra gas I have in the tank, even more than I think. Like, even when I think I'm at the end, there's actually still a bit of reserve. And so that happened. And after that, even though it was like fine, and I learned a lot from it, so I kind of came up with a strategy going forward so that way that never happens again. But ever since then, I had a bit of a mental block to be able to dive deeper than 68, 69, and I was basically stuck at that depth for I think well over a year. I'd have to look back on my training sheets, but yeah, it was a long time. So I've made a ton of mistakes when training in freediving, even though I was training alongside some of the best freedivers in the world and had some of the best coaches in the world. I still effed up quite a lot, and not just in the planning aspect of the diving, but also on the nutrition side. I had a lot of issues with squeezes, especially trachea squeezes, LMC'd a lot, overtrained a lot, story of my life. Just I would say every other month, I would just get overtrained and crash and burn. And then, due to all the overtraining, I was just getting sick all the time, even ending up in the emergency room a couple of times, which was not fun. On top of that, I had all the other daily health issues I was dealing with just from being malnourished because I wasn't eating the right foods. And so having the migraines and the joint pain, fatigue, acid reflux, the brain fog, all of this even tenfold because of the freediving, which just took such a hit on my immune system, and like chronic chest pain for not just like the days after the dive, but even months after dives, I would have chest pain and trachea pain, which really, really sucked because it was so painful just to even breathe. So I don't want to sensationalize it or anything, but believe it or not, with all this going on, I was still doing dives 50 to 70 meter range and still doing competitions, and I was doing this for years, and this was just how I lived. And always, the deeper that I got, the sicker and unhealthier I became. I got more LMCs, even more chest pressure, more difficulty breathing, more fatigue, bouts of depression, total burnout. Like, it was just horrendous. And whenever someone asked me, like, what's stopping you from going deeper? I'm sure as a freediver, you probably get that question a lot. Like, what's stopping you? For some people, it's equalization. For other people, maybe it's a mental block or relaxation. I did have that mental block for a while, but when it wasn't that, it was always that I like effed myself up, either with a squeeze or LMC or just something, or I had to leave the country and go somewhere. So that went on for, well, years, and the dives over time were just taking a toll on the immune system, making the issues even worse and getting more sick. And I was out of the water actually a lot, about 30, I would say I had to cancel all my dives around 20 to 30% of the time. And sometimes I even had to cancel competition dives, which really sucked. So it was horrible. I wasn't very happy, and my freediving plateaued, which sucked. And at times, like I said, I had the chronic chest pain. And because I felt like total crap, I was snapping at the people around me. So I think I lost a few friends in that process. Actually, I know I did. And I certainly wasn't my best self. Everyone talks about how healthy and amazing the freediving lifestyle is, and it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. I for sure was living the healthy freediving lifestyle for a while, maybe for the first year and a half, 2 years. It was definitely healthier than how I was living, because I was like always going out, like drinking and doing that sort of stuff, and then that all kind of toned down once I started freediving. So I was living a much healthier lifestyle than I used to, but at some point, I don't know when exactly it was, things started to kind of go downhill, and I started living basically an unhealthy freediving lifestyle. As dark as that is, it's true. Then what happened over this last year and a half, slowly I started to make some changes, and I changed my food. So I started on a diet where I get more nutrition. That changed my health like dramatically. I also made some changes in my life just to reduce the stress. And then last October, I took about a 6-month break from training in depth. And I noticed right away that when I stopped freediving, a lot of the health issues went away, and the chest pain went away. And overall, I felt like so much more happier and so much more energized. I mean, I felt like a completely different person. So a month ago, I decided to start training again. And I committed to a month of training with my absolutely, totally awesome student and friend, Lee. Shout out to Lee. I know she's listening. This time I decided I wanted to do things differently. I planned the training schedule differently, and I started planning my training sessions differently. My plan was, let's have a sustainable training plan that I'm not gonna F myself up, and I'm not going to burn out or anything like that, and that I can maintain for a long period of time. And so that's what Leah and I are doing together. Also, we changed the pre-dive preparation, and we did a lot of trial and error, like just sort of introducing things and ramping it up. Now, when I go freediving after this pre-dive preparation, my lungs feel so good. They feel so happy and so elastic. And still tinkering with the nutrition, still making changes. This is always going to be a work in progress. And then also like made some other lifestyle changes. Now that I've sort of instilled these new habits, I'm feeling great. And I'm happy to report that my freediving now is absolutely amazing. And my health, mental, and physical is the best I think I've ever felt in my whole life. So I feel like I've sort of come out of the other side, and looking back, knowing what I know now, I noticed that there's just a lack of information about how to train for freediving and how to prepare for freediving in a nice way, in a healthy way. This could entail taking into consideration the following things. So first, the nutritional side of things. I wish I knew more about this when I first started freediving, because I definitely wasn't getting the nutrients that I needed, and that was for sure affecting my health and just getting sick all the time and being out of the water a lot. Then it's taking into consideration creating a sustainable training plan. And then I find there's a lack of information and a lot of misinformation out there about other things that are important to consider for freediving. For example, relaxation and mental training, pre-dive preparation, and the breathing, the supplementation. There's also a lot of other things that makes training and competing in freediving a very sort of mysterious thing. Even if you're training with a coach, you can end up making a lot of mistakes in this sport. Mistakes that not only cost you time out of the water, but that damage your health. And some things, who knows how it'll affect you long term. For example, if you're squeezing constantly over and over, if you're getting lung squeezes, the amount of scar tissue that can build up. Now, I'm no doctor, but if you've got scar tissue in your lungs, that can't be good for you. So this lack of information, just because freediving is such a new sport and we just don't know a lot of things. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. Just this morning I was riding my bike and I ran into another instructor, Roberto, and he said a student came up to him to start his course, and the student said, so I heard I have to eat vegan for 10 days before I start my freediving course, which is obviously not true. There's all this stuff out there, and I feel like especially beginner students don't know what to believe. But even if you're training, you can make some mistakes in believing some of the stuff that's out there that is just incorrect. So in this podcast, I'm going to try and give you helpful information and hopefully more accurate information, as accurate as I possibly can, about freediving training. Keep in mind, there's a lot about this sport that we just don't know, that I don't know. And so on some things, I can only speculate as best I can and hypothesize, but I will do my very best to bring you the most accurate and up-to-date information using the sources that I have around me and that I have access to, and also just to the best of my knowledge. So I'll be investing a great amount of time and effort to research various topics that can help improve your freediving training, and I'll also be analyzing and trying to make sense of what's working and not working in my training and share about that. And then hopefully freedivers in the hub will share about the training techniques and concepts that are working for them. So everyone's different. What works for me may not work for you. So that's why I hope to build a network so we can all learn from each other, try different things, so you can really find the things that work best for you. My only goal in doing this podcast is to provide information to help freedivers all over the world improve their freediving performances and their breath hold times in a nice, healthy, and sustainable way. So this way you avoid injury, illness, and accidents, and so you're training in a smart way. So for example, I have a friend, let's just call him John, and he comes to Dahab a few times a year to train in freediving. And he's known to have a reputation to black out like all the time. So he usually hires a coach, and we'll often share the taxi to the Blue Hole together. So on the way to the Blue Hole, I'll be with my buddies, I'll be with his coach, and I'll be like, hey, John, so what are you going to do today? And he's like, oh, I'm going to do 32 meters, no fins. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, good luck. Then we'll get to Blue Hole. He'll go freediving with his coach. I'll go freediving with my buddies. On the way back, we're sharing the taxi. And I'm like, oh, so how did it go? And he's like, oh, I blacked out. Oh my gosh, sorry. And then next day, same group of people. John is there. So, John, what are you going to do today? I'm going to do 32 meters, no fins. Really? Yeah. And we get to Blue Hole. And fast forward, what do you know? On the way back, I'm like, how did it go? He's like, oh, I blacked out. I'm like, oh, man. Then next day, same group. John is there. So, John, what are you going to do today? I'm going to do 32 meters, no fins. Really? Yeah. And we get to Blue Hole. Fast forward, on the way back. Oh, so how did it go? I blacked out. Really? You don't say. So this is just an example of freediving in a way that's not a really smart, sustainable way. Who knows the long-term effect of repeated blackouts and the bad habits that you're making in the brain, making it even more prone to blacking out. So this can't be good. Do some of the top freedivers in the world black out? Yes, of course they do. But it's not like an everyday thing. I mean, maybe every so often, if at all. I mean, I've trained with some very high level athletes quite a few times, and some of them I didn't even see blackout one single time. So point is, you can excel at freediving and become quite good and go quite deep without ever having a blackout. So my goal is to help inform freedivers about training concepts and preparing for freediving so that you improve your performances, but hopefully in a way that you're not blacking out, getting lung injuries, ear injuries, overtraining, etc. As such, what I'll try to do is first provide a foundation for understanding the preparation for freediving, the health and nutritional needs, the mental and physical preparation, all things to consider before starting your depth training or pool training. Or if you've already started your training, you can implement some of these concepts now, and I think you should. It's definitely better late than never. And then future episodes will make a much deeper effort to discuss training concepts for freediving. My basic orientation is that you have a right to know how to freedive in a smart and healthy way, with complete transparency, without any propaganda or pushing any kind of agenda. So I'll let you know what sources I'm using for the information I provide, what things I know or strongly believe to be true. Now, there's not a lot of studies about freediving, so many times I'll be forced to speculate, but that's after a ton of research and after my own trial and error. And when I'm speaking with other freedivers and finding sources, even if they're not necessarily the most conservative freediver, they may have points that you choose to consider, so I'll be very clear about that as well. So I offer that as introduction to the Freediving Podcast, just so you understand what the purpose of this podcast is. And the goal at this moment is to try to do this at least weekly for 30 to 45 minutes to give you an update on key information that you need in a quick, easily accessible format. So each podcast will have certain commonalities in terms of what I want to feature. And there's going to be a standard format to this, which I want to introduce now, just so you have an understanding about where I'm going. So what I'm going to do each episode is first I'll introduce the topic, And if it applies, I'll start with any latest news or articles or just any recent information I can find out about the topic, just to give you an idea about what's going on now. Then I'll go into the studies, the research, personal experiences, maybe some more articles. So I'll make sure that I have a compilation of key studies and stories. And just so you know where I'm getting the information, I'm looking at all the books that I have, the studies, the papers, articles, anything I can find online, speaking with other freedivers here about their training and what they're battling with, and eventually, hopefully, from the international network that I'm building on Facebook, which you can find at facebook.com/groups/Freediving Podcast. So right now there's just me in the group because this is all just starting, but I hope to have freedivers from all over the world to share their insights so we can have an international flavor. And it's a really great opportunity to learn about training for freediving, what people are currently doing in their training for not just the best results, but to keep them safe and healthy. For example, now we have COVID-19 in the picture, so how are people training and getting around with this pandemic? How are people training to avoid lowering their immune system and making them more susceptible to issues when getting COVID-19? So I'll talk quite a bit about this in the next podcast when I talk about vitamins. And all the links will be available on the website at reneeblondon.com/podcast, which is where the show is hosted. Beyond that, I will also, because I'm currently training in freediving about 3-4 times a week, so I'll offer deeper analysis about the topics, including the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of particular freediving training concepts. What effect did it have on my freediving, my health, on those around me? And I'll try to offer information so we can all learn about these things. And then the last part of the show will be devoted to sharing some of the myths that I'm chasing down related to the topic, if this applies. So I'm always looking for more information, so that's why I'm really hoping to build up the network run by freedivers. So this way I can find out from you what is happening in your freediving training, what things are helping or hurting your training, what are other freedivers doing around you. We all know these like bits and pieces of information about training for freediving, of course some people more than others, and together we can piece this puzzle together. And so I'll try and offer more knowledge as things come up in the group. For example, maybe new solutions to different training issues as we just find them out. Safety information, just as things happen, blackouts, DCS, accidents, things like that. How can we make the sport safer? And any helpful information to help you recover from freediving injuries, overtraining, blackouts, if God forbid it happens, which sometimes unfortunately it does. And that's where I'll end most of the shows, with this idea that I want to give you an opportunity to explore and consider, for those who are freediving, the things that you can do to potentially help your training along. And for those who aren't training at the moment but intend to start in the near future, how to best prepare for your freediving. And then this way, wherever you are in your program, you can be able to freedive in a way that you can dive deep with amazing sensations where you're totally fresh and totally happy on the surface without any issues at all. And obviously, I don't have an answer to everything. This is an unpaid, ongoing one-woman effort here at the moment. So I'll certainly do the very best I can to provide helpful information and to address some of the issues in freediving, not just about training concepts, but also in the mentality, maybe even the education of the sport. So that's what this show is about. I'm going to look at freediving from all these different angles And a big shout out to all the freediving instructors out there that are trying to teach and implement safe freediving practices. So having presented what I'm about and what the show is about, I will end this episode here, and the next podcast, I'll get right into it. The theme for the month of July is nutrition for freediving. So in the next episodes, I'll be discussing the various vitamins that can improve your lung health and function, that can increase your lung capacity, improve your respiratory system. That way you can freedive better, recover from your dives faster, and be more resilient to bacterial and viral infections like COVID-19. So I should have that up in about a week, I hope sooner. Thank you all for tuning in. Feel free to check out my website at reneeblondon.com for more information about the podcast. And also, if you want to subscribe to my Friday 5 newsletter, which begins going out on August 7th. Have a great day and happy diving.